What's up everyone, it's Kelly and today I've got a nail polish 101 video for you. It's been a while since I've done a nail polish 101. If you haven't heard of it, it's basically my series where I go through all of the beginner questions and tips and tricks to learn if you are just getting into nail polish, but it's also a good refresher for people who are already into nail polish. I do have a whole playlist about it, but today we're going to be talking about matte top coat. Specifically, I had this idea to go through my collection and show you what matte top coat looks like over every different finish of polish. And this is something that I've wanted to do for so long. I got a little bit carried away, so I'm going to be showing you what matte top coat looks like versus glossy top coat over 25 different polishes in every finish that I could think of. But I also I had some variations that I also wanted to throw in there. But before we get into that, I do want to talk a little bit about matte top coat in general. Now, I have talked about matte top coat a lot on my channel, but if you're not familiar with what it is, basically it's kind of the opposite of a glossy top coat. You know how regular top coat will make your nail polish really smooth and shiny? Matte top coat takes away all of the shine and it leaves an almost plasticky, smooth kind of finish. And it's actually a really interesting way to kind of change up nail polishes that you already own, and it's really fun to experiment with because sometimes, especially over certain finishes, it really has a transformative property and it can make the polish look like a completely different polish. So there are a lot of different matte top coats out on the market. I've actually done a video comparing a few of my favorites. It's a little bit older and I do have a lot more of them now, so I might do an updated version soon of that, but I'll talk a little bit more at the end of the video of a few of my go-tos at the moment. But I also just wanted to talk about a few tips about using matte top coat before we dive in. So tip number one is something that you guys ask me about a lot, and that is that I always use glossy top coat before I use matte top coat. And this might sound a little bit counterintuitive because it sounds like it's wasting extra product and you're not going to get that glossy finish anyway, so why not just go in directly with the matte top coat? And especially if you're working with a matte nail polish already, it seems like kind of a weird choice to jump into the glossy and then go back into the matte, but there are a few reasons why I like to do it. The most important of which is that glossy top coat, especially quick dry top coat, helps to cure all of the layers underneath it. So when you're painting your nails, if you don't use top coat, you'll probably notice that it takes a really long time to dry, and a lot of times you'll have them on for the whole day and then you go to sleep at night and then you wake up and you've got crease marks on your nails, and that's just because if you're not using a product to help dry all of the layers, it's not going to fully dry. So I like to use glossy top coat for that as a way of kind of just sealing in my manicure and making all of the layers dry, and then on top of that I'll do my matte top coat. But the other big reason why I like to use glossy top coat first is because it really smooths out the nail polish first. If you're working with a nail polish that has any sort of lumpiness, like if it has glitter in it, or if you're doing nail art where you're drawing in different elements, when you put matte top coat directly on that, it's going to kind of highlight all of the lumps and bumps. But if you put on glossy top coat first, it's kind of going to give everything an even smooth layer before you go in with your regular matte top coat. My next tip is something that I hear a lot of people asking for advice about, and basically the question is, why is it when I wear matte nail polish or matte top coat that throughout the week I notice it getting shinier and glossier? And it's actually a really simple solution. Matte top coat doesn't actually wear off and turn shiny over time. What that is the oils that are on your nails, that are on your skin, that are on everything that you're touching, that are causing the matte finish to look a little bit shiny. So when you're wearing matte top coat, if you're washing your hands, you're going to notice that those nails look shiny while they're in the water. But once you dry your hands, you're going to notice that they're back to matte. And we do have oils on our skin, in our hair, on our nails that can start to make the matte top coat look a little bit glossy, but you just need to wipe or wash that off and it will go back to being matte. I notice especially that it happens a lot when I'm moisturizing a lot or when I'm using cuticle oils, but I will just wash that off of my hand, or I'll kind of just wipe my nails off to keep that matte texture on there. My next tip is for those of you who do not like the sensation of textured nails but like the look of it. If you still want to have that sort of style on your nails without feeling like you have sandpaper on your nails, which is something I know a lot of people don't love, especially about a reflective, gritty kind of polish, or the like liquid sand kind of of pixie dust textured polishes. A way to get around that while still keeping that sort of finish is to do a coat of your glossy top coat and then do a coat of matte top coat on top of that. That way it still has the look of a textured polish, but it feels very smooth to the touch. And then my last matte top coat tip for you is what to do if your matte top coat gets gloopy and thick. Sometimes it'll even cause these little white dots on your nail, and that is an easy fix. You just need to restore it. I actually have a whole video. It's another one of my Nail Polish 101 videos, and that is how to restore your base and top coats. I use the same exact methods for my matte top coat, and it really helps fix them up and make them usable again. So if you haven't checked that out, I highly recommend watching that video to restore your matte top coat. So now that we've got all the tips out of the way, let's get to experimenting. Like I said, I've got 25 different nail polishes to go over, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you side-by-side comparisons of what they look like with glossy top coat and what they look like with matte top coat, and I tried to use as many different finishes as I could think of, and we can see just how transformative matte top coat can be. So yeah, let's just dive right in and roll the footage. So we're going to start off with the basics and then we'll move into the more complex finishes, but first I just want to show you what a cream polish with no shimmer or anything in it looks like with a matte top coat. So this is OPI Flex on the Beach. It's just this nice peachy salmon cream finish color. I have a glossy top coat on it. You can see it's nice and shiny, and here I am applying my matte top coat, and once that dries it does create a non-shiny finish. So you can see on the left side I've got what it looks like with the glossy top coat, and on the right side you can see what it looks like with the matte top coat. So immediately the polish will lose its shine. It has a little bit of a plasticky finish, and sometimes it can slightly alter the color of the polish underneath, but this is the absolute basics of what matte top coat will do. So here is another example. This is with a jelly finish, meaning an intentionally sheer polish, and personally I love a jelly finish nail polish. I love that little hint of visible nail line, and I absolutely love the way that it looks with a matte top coat. So this is Sir Colors Rose Jelly. It's got a little bit of a milkiness to it, but you can still see that sheerness to the color, and you can see I did apply my glossy top coat over this, so it has a very nice high shine to it. It has a little bit of that squishy jelly-like quality that I love to see, but once I applied my matte top coat, it really changed the polish a lot. You can see the visible nail line really well, but it has that sort of plasticky, non-shiny finish, and to me, wearing a matte jelly, it almost gives the look of polygel nails, and I personally love that style, so that's why this is one of my favorites. I think it looks so gorgeous, and it really does change the manicure, and with an almost nude sheer shade like this, it almost feels like a Your Nails But Better kind of color, because it kind of just blends in seamlessly with your skin. So now let's move on to the shimmers, and there are a lot of different kinds of shimmers, so I tried to show examples of multiple different types, and this first one we're going to do is a mainstream shimmer. So we've got Essie Starstruck Accord, we've got this nice warm toned purple base, and then we have a soft golden shimmer running throughout. It's a pretty subtle shimmer and it doesn't have any streakiness to it, which I think is pretty typical when it comes to mainstream shimmers like this. I think this is a very common kind of finish that you can see. Here it is with the matte top coat, and especially when it comes to darker colors, I feel like you can see the shade a lot better once you have it mattified, but it also softens up the look of that glitter, and it almost makes it look a little bit like heathered or sandy kind of feeling. Now here's another mainstream shimmer. This is Orly Cranberry Believe It, and this one is a little bit different. I would say the shimmer in here is a little bit more pronounced, and it also has that almost brush strokey look to it. Like, it feels very slightly pearlized, even though it doesn't actually dry with brush strokes on my nails. But here's what it looks like with the regular top coat, and then once I apply my matte top coat, shades like this with this specific type of shimmer always give me a very velvety look. It's actually something that I love to wear around the holidays, especially with a red shimmer like this, and I think it just adds so much depth to the color, and it really just makes it feel very velvety and soft and rich and luxurious. So I absolutely love this combo mattified. So now let's try some shimmery shades from Indies, because those can vary a lot. This is KB Shimmer Paired Up, and this one has a lot going on in it. It's this gorgeous purple base. We have a duochrome shimmer running throughout. We also have these larger flecks of silver hollow, and hollow holo is something really interesting. We're going to talk about that a lot more later in this video, but holo transforms significantly once you put a matte top coat over it. In this case, because there's so much other stuff going on, it really does transform the polish a lot. So you can see everything kind of becomes a little bit less dimensional than it looked with the glossy top coat, and you can see a little bit of that holo sparkle in there, but for the most part, all of those shimmers kind of faded into a more white or silvery kind of color, and the duochrome shimmer is slightly less pronounced, but you can still see it moving around the nail. So here is another shimmer that also happens to have some holographic sparkle in it. This is Cirque Colors Velvet Rope, and this is a very different type of shimmer. This one I would qualify as more of a jelly-like consistency, but I did actually apply it for full coverage, so I did 3 coats, but this one's this gorgeous red base. We've got an intense gold shimmer running throughout, and then we also have a very subtle holo sparkle running throughout. So this is what it looks like glossy. Of course, applying my matte top coat again, and this one again has a very transformative look to it. So everything kind of condenses down where it feels a little bit more like it's one layer instead of different layers of shimmer that kind of look different based on how they hit the light. And the holo sparkle in here does fade down. You can still see it very, very slightly, but for the most part, again, it does have that sort of white shimmer kind of look to it. So this is another shimmer. It's a very different kind of shimmer, and it's from a boutique brand called Smith & Cult. It's called Certain Sweetness, and this is a type of shimmer that I like to classify as a glass fleck because there's just something very soft and delicate about it, and it has a sheer look, but it's not quite iridescent. So this one, we have this buff beige kind of base color, and then we have that glass fleck running throughout. So I wanted to see how this would transform with a matte top coat. So of course, applying my matte top coat, and what I found this one do was it really toned down the sparkliness of it, but it still kept that sort of soft elegance to the color, and it almost feels a little bit more frosty with the matte top coat than it does with the shimmer. And you can also see that the light has to be a little bit more direct in order for the shimmers to actually sparkle through. You can see on the shiny side, it definitely looks a lot more sparkly, especially when I'm moving my nail around. So now let's try a few examples of what I think is one of the more exciting finishes when it comes to matte top coat, which is holo. So this is Color Club Harp on it. This is a linear holo, meaning that you can see the lines of rainbow across the nail. It's very small pigments, and it just creates that linear sort of shift. So as I move my nail around, you can see a full rainbow across. So holo pigment does change significantly when it comes to matte top coat. It actually ends up pulling all of that holo sparkle out, and it kind of makes it a little bit less dimensional. Now, this is one of my most holographic polishes of all time, so you can actually still see a little bit of that holo sparkling through, but for the most part, with the matte top coat, this looks pretty gray on the nails. So now let's try a scattered holo. Scattered holo is a little bit different from linear holo in that you still get that rainbow of pigment coming from one glitter, but it doesn't have that full line of rainbow. It kind of just feels a little bit more randomized. So this is the shade Fairy Wink from LA Colors. It's this gorgeous pink. It's absolutely packed with that holo sparkle, and you can see it's almost just like randomized where it doesn't look like a line of rainbow, but you just see different colors popping up when you move your nail around. So this one also changed pretty significantly with the matte top coat. For the most part, we did lose the majority of that holographic color, and it almost shifted into this white silvery kind of glitter. It definitely changed the look of the texture. It was still one smooth texture across the nail, but in the matte version, it almost looks a little bit like it has a sandpapery rough kind of finish. So I thought that was really interesting. So now I wanted to try a little bit of a more advanced finish. This is Zoya Sparrow, and this is kind of a combination of some of the previous finishes we've tried. So we've got that jelly-like base where it has a little bit of that intentional sheerness. We have a shimmer running throughout, and then we also have these bigger silver hollow glitters. So when I move my nail around, you can see they hit the light, and we get a nice little rainbow shimmer of colors in there. So I was curious to see what this would look like with a matte top coat over it, and I thought that this combination of finishes in the polish looked a little bit different mattified. I felt like I could still see a lot of the layers, especially where those hollow glitters came through. They definitely changed to look a little bit more silvery, but I could still see the levels of them. So when it comes to a jelly polish, I don't think it flattens the dimensionality of the polish too much. I think it still keeps it intact. So moving on to metallics. This is another interesting finish when it comes to matte top coat, in that I don't think it makes a significant difference for the most part. I'm going to show you a few different types of metallic pigment, but this one is Silver Agent from What's Up Nails, and you can see with the glossy top coat on, yes, it has a shine to it, but it still actually ends up looking fairly matte on the nail. There's really not this glossiness to the color, just because that's what the pigment looks like. So when you see them side by side, it's really not a significant difference. The matte look almost has this sort of brushed chrome kind of vibe to it, whereas the glossy is just a little bit shinier and more reflective. But for the most part, I don't think there's a significant difference here. This is another type of polish that I would consider to fall in the metallic category, but it's really more of a shimmer. So this is Zoya Amara. It's a brown base and it has this coppery shimmer running throughout. And I think when you're using a sort of monochromatic shimmer, when it's in the metallic color family, like gold, silver, bronze, that kind of color, sometimes in my brain I still consider that to be a metallic. So in this case, with this type of metallic polish, I do think that it's a lot more transformative than the more foil metallic kind of shades. So you can see this one really changed the look of the polish. Of course, the base is just a little bit stronger coming through, and then we also have all of that shimmer kind of leveled out onto one level on the nail, if that makes sense. And you can see that it's a little bit less sparkly and a little bit more of a smooth velvety kind of shimmer. Now this shade is what I would consider to be like the true foil metallic kind of color. This is Starly Bellatrix, and they make a lot of different colors in this type of finish where it really just looks like aluminum foil but in different colors. And this to me is just the height of what a metallic polish generally looks like. And this is actually with a glossy top coat over it, but even with that glossy top coat, you really don't see a glossy shine to this kind of finish, just because that is the nature of this type of finish. So you can see once I apply my matte top coat and let it dry, it basically looks the same. There are a few very, very subtle differences. You'll see it's a little bit less reflective. So if you're looking at your reflection through the nails, you're going to see a little bit less of it, and maybe it's just a little bit softer, but for the most part, it does look pretty much the same. I also wanted to try a different type of sort of metallic finish, and that would be the frosted metals that Holo Taco does. There are some other brands who do it as well, ILNP being another big one, but basically this is kind of just a mix between a metallic and a shimmer. And in this case with Holo Taco Royal Crush, there's also a hollow sparkle running throughout. So I was really intrigued to see how this one would transform. So I applied my matte top coat, and you can see this one actually did have a little bit more significant of a difference here, because all of that metallic shimmery flake almost just looks pure white, and it really lightens up the color of that purple. I feel like it does look like a lighter shade, and again, you sort of lose that holographic pigment in there. It just looks a little bit more silvery slash white. Now here's another finish I was really excited to try out that I've never mattified before this video, and that is a flash reactive shimmer. So flash reactive glitters is something that they look extra sparkly in normal lighting, but then when you use your phone flash or a flashlight or something like that, it looks very cartoonishly sparkly. So this is the shade Slush Fund from KB Shimmer, and this one has a flash reactive glitter running throughout, but it also has a lot of other shimmer in there, most notably a duochromy kind of shimmer. So you can see a little bit of that coppery vibe coming through. And this is with a glossy top coat. These types of finishes tend to dry a little bit textured, so you do usually need to double up on the top coat. But I think with the matte, it really significantly changes the way that it looks. I think it shifts from looking like a full coverage glitter into looking like a shimmer polish that has a base color and just a shimmer running throughout. and that glitter ends up looking just white on the nail. So I thought that was really intriguing. I also wanted to show you what it looked like with my phone flash, so you can see it still has that super reflective sparkle, but it's not as sparkly. So it's still there, it's still cartoonishly bright, but it doesn't have that sparkle when you move your nail around. So now trying out the Krelli finishes. This is a type of finish that I see most often with indie brands, where you have a base color that's somewhere between a cream and a jelly, so it's slightly sheer, just sheer enough to show through the glitters that are also in it. So this is Painted Polish You're My Jam. It's a white Krelli base, and then we have a couple of different colors of metallic glitters running throughout, and this is one of my absolute favorite finishes to mattify. I feel like on camera it really doesn't look significantly different, but especially when you're working with a glitter that is metallic, like in this one, it ends up mattifying those glitters and making them just look a little bit brighter and softer, and I think it looks so stunning in person. So it really gives a more artsy paint splatter kind of vibe when it's in its matte version. And then here's another example of a Krelli with glitters in it. This is Cadillacquer Beautifully Cold, and this one's a little bit different because we do have a matte black glitter in here, but we also have a shimmer. So this is another one that has a duochrome shimmer. It kind of shifts from a golden yellow into a coppery shade, and we also have this really gorgeous, somewhat sheer gray base that has a little bit of warmth to it. And this is another shade that I think just looks absolutely stunning when you mattify it. It's harder to tell on camera again, but it really just makes it look a little bit more speckled and rustic. It's almost like a finish of a countertop or something like that, and I think it just kind of levels everything out really nicely in its matte form. So I think it looks gorgeous, and I almost always want to mattify these types of polishes. So this one is more of a jelly-like finish, although it does reach full opacity and cover up my visible nail line, so I wanted to keep it in the Krelli category. This is Tutti Frutti from Cirque Colors. So it's this really gorgeous, very juicy red base, and then it is packed with an iridescent flaky. So iridescent flakes are really interesting to mattify and just see how they kind of shift, because iridescent flakes and shimmers kind of take on very transformative qualities, and when you are mattifying them, it's almost forcing them into one specific color category. So when it comes to mattifying shades like this, I always think it's really interesting. It almost gives it this sort of like paint chip fleck kind of look, and again, it really levels everything out so it looks like it's just one level of glitter and shimmer in there instead of being a little bit more dimensional that it tends to look in Glossy. But you can also see the color of the iridescent shimmers a lot better, and in this case they kind of settled into this mostly gold color. So just to show another example of that iridescent flaky kind of finish, in this case this is not a Krelli or a jelly, this is actually a cream base, which is Orly Into the Deep, which is that dark gray color, and then I topped it off with a topper, which is Fun Lacquer Blue Sapphires, and that is an iridescent flaky that shifts blue into green. So I wanted to show you what this one looked like, because when you're working with a jelly that has flakies in it, you can see all of the different layers of the flakes because it's not totally opaque with that base color. In this case, we only have one layer of flakes. So I wanted to show you how it ends up actually looking the same mattified as it did in the jelly version, where it kind of all just condenses everything to one layer. In the glossy state, I feel like you can see a little bit more that this is a topper, whereas in the matte it almost looks like it could have been a part of the polish. So I think that's a really interesting distinction to notice. So now let's move on to some other kinds of sheer finishes. This is Island P Horizon, and it's actually an iridescent flaky that you can build up to full coverage, and initially I was going to show you what it looked like with 3 coats because I think that looks really gorgeous on, but it also still has that sheerness where you can see the visible nail line. But I also wanted to give you an example of what it looked like in just one coat, because sometimes I like this kind of vibe where it's almost like a palette cleanser. It feels very soft and neutral, but it still has a ton of sparkle. And personally, I love the way that this type of look is mattified. I feel like it just makes it a little bit more subtle and a little bit less noticeable and sparkly on the nails, but it still gives you that very elegant, shimmery kind of finish. It's just a little bit more muted. So here's another sheer type of finish. This is KB Shimmer in Good Spirits, and this is an iridescent sort of pearly finish that you can build up, but you still see a little bit of visible nail line through it. And this is a really intriguing type of polish because it very much transforms based on what you're wearing it over. In my case, I'm just wearing it on its own, so it has a very sheer look, and then when it hits the light, you can see that blue to green kind of sparkle in there. Now, with this type of polish, I think once it's mattified, it actually ends up looking a little bit more opaque on the nails because it sort of forces that iridescent shimmer to take on more color. So I think that's really interesting. I feel like in this case, it looks a lot less sheer on my nail when mattified, and it doesn't have that intense sparkliness, but it does still have that smooth, velvety kind of shimmer that we've been seeing a lot with matte finishes. And then just another interesting topper that I figured people might be curious to see mattified. This is Colors AU, which is a gold flake top coat, and it is actual gold flakes. So I topped it over Muy Caliente from Orly, which is this neon reddish orange kind of color. And you can see in its glossy state, it really does look like beautiful little gold nuggets. I think it's such an intensely elegant kind of topper, and I absolutely love wearing this one. Now, surprisingly, it really doesn't change when you use a matte top coat over it. You can see that the matte top coat definitely affected the base color underneath, and it made it that plasticky sort of finish. But in itself, the gold flakes in this topper aren't actually glossy or shiny, so they end up still looking the same. You still get a lot of really interesting depth there, and you can see all the little crinkles of the gold flake in there. So I just thought that was a really cool comparison here. And then the final couple examples I want to show you is a multi-chrome type of finish. So as far as I'm aware, I don't think I've ever done a matte top coat over a multi-chrome, and a part of me was thinking that it would end up being the same as what it looks like over a hollow, where it would kind of take away that multi-chromatic ability. But when I mattified this one, which is ILNP Eclipse, one of my favorite multi-chrome polishes, it still ended up having all of that color across the spectrum. It was just a little bit less sparkly, so I actually found it to be really intriguing. And then the very last example is another multi-chrome, but this one's a little bit different of a finish. This is a multi-chrome flaky that is full coverage. So this is Ice Cream Nails Cosmic Ray. It's a really interesting, unique sort of finish in that it still gives you that multi-chrome look where you can see all of the colors based on how you move around your nail. But because it has this flaky to it, it almost feels a little bit more dimensional because the light is hitting those flakies in different ways and just making it look very extra and sparkly. So I was so curious to see what this would look like with a matte top coat over it. And again, for the most part, I think it looked pretty much the same. I think it takes away a little bit of that extra sparkliness that you get from the flakies, but it also makes it look a lot smoother because even with a glossy top coat, this kind of finish still looks like it would be lumpy on the nails, which it is not. But in the matte version, it does look like it's very smoothed out. So I thought that was also a very interesting comparison. So yeah, that is it for my experimenting with matte top coat today. Honestly, I could have kept going because I feel like every single nail polish really looks different when you're applying matte top coat over it, and I feel like literally endless experimenting can be done with it, especially when it comes to shimmery polishes, glittery polishes, reflective polishes, that sort of thing. I just think it makes them so fascinatingly different, and just buying one bottle of matte top coat can double your nail polish collection. So I think that's really fun, and honestly, I highly recommend it, even just for experimenting. There's also different nail art that you can do, which I actually have a pretty old video on how to do different types of nail art using one color nail polish and matte top coat. So definitely check that out if you're interested. But yeah, endless experimenting can be done with matte top coat. It is so much fun. So I mentioned I did do a video a few years back on my matte top coats, but I do have some different ones now that I really love. So I just wanted to give you a quick update that my current go-tos, which does change often, but these are just my current ones that I've been using and reaching for. That would be Orly, Colors, and A England. And the A England one is what I used in today's video. So I will link those down below. You can check them out if you're interested, but there are a ton of really great matte top coats out there. And it's also also really fun to see the varying levels of matteness that a polish can get. So yeah, I really encourage you to kind of experiment around, try different brands, and see what you like. But yeah, that is it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. I had so much fun with this. So if you have any ideas for other nail polish 101 or experimenting kind of videos that you want to see, definitely let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. It really helps me out. It lets me know I'm doing a good job. And if you're not subscribed to my channel, please consider subscribing. I put out new videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And of course, a huge shout out to my supporters on Patreon, my royal astronomer Amanda M, as well as my cosmic admirals Rocket Man's daughter, Paola, Ken, Rosie, and Courtney. I really appreciate your support, and I'll see you all in my next video. Bye. Today's fun fact question comes from Patreon supporter Chris, and Chris wants to know, what is the most interesting polish in your collection? It doesn't necessarily mean color, it could be how you procured it, there's an interesting story behind it, it's your absolute favorite, etc. Honestly, I feel like the most interesting polish in my collection is also my least favorite nail polish in my collection, but it is my favorite polish to hate, and that is OPI Pineapples Have Peelings Too. I feel like I have so many nail polishes that there are just so many standouts, but when people are like, oh, show me the worst nail polish you have, I'm always like, oh, I've got a doozy for you. So yeah, I really think that that's probably my most interesting just in terms of like showing people, but I would say probably my most special would be the shade Kelly's Galaxy from Orly, which is a collaboration shade, and it is the first shade I ever made with them, and it actually was created doing the Orly Color Labs experience, and you guys liked it so much that we ended up making it a collab nail polish, which was such an incredible experience. But it was really just such a special process getting to make my own custom nail polish and then having the response of it to be so big from you. And I don't know, I really treasured that experience, and it was very special to me, so that polish will always have a very special place in my heart. I almost just teared up for a second there. But yeah, if you have any especially interesting nail polishes that you have a funky story behind, definitely let me know in the comments. And I will see you all in my next video. Bye!